Number 1.
I wasn't what you called hood or hip when I was a teenager. I grew up in the suburbs with a Puerto Rican mother and a Trinidadian father. My household consisted of strict parenting and constant lectures about the horrors drugs can do to your body. Naturally, I rebelled. I took my first puff of a cigarette when I was 14, and I didn't like it until I learned how to inhale. My parents never found out that when I took our dog for a walk, I was also sucking on a cancer stick. If they ever knew that, I would have certainly been punished in the worst possible way. A few blocks down the road from our subdivision was a neighborhood called Fieldstone, where most of my friends lived. Fieldstone was a cluster of low-income houses that always had children in the yard, guys selling or doing drugs, or old men drinking beer and playing dominoes. I loved going to Fieldstone because it was a whole different country compared to the manicured lawns and two-story houses that I lived in. My best friend's name was Nyanka. She and I would go home on 2 different buses, change clothes, watch an episode of Maury, and meet up at Ingalls, the halfway point between our houses. We would walk to her house, or Fieldstone, or do homework, then explore the neighborhood. One hot summer day, as Nyanka and I were walking toward our friend Brittany's house, we passed a man named Key. Key was about 32 and had craters in his face that I later found out were due to his meth use. Nyanka knew him, and we stopped to say hello. Key then invited us to his house to chief. I had no idea what chiefing was until Nyanka whispered that we were about to smoke some weed. I was nervous as hell because of the terrible stories my dad told me about this guy he knew that he smoked one time. He forgot his name and had to put on a straitjacket. I didn't want to look like a chump, so I trusted my friend, put on a brave face, and kept moving. We get to Key's house and his roommate, a 30-something paraplegic that got around in a wheelchair, greeted us. He creeped me out immediately. Here we are, 2 16-year-old girls in this grown man's house with his roommate eyeing me up and down like a juicy steak. We sat down on the couch while Key rolled up and the roommate, whose name was Troy, wheeled his wheelchair right in front of me and just stared. I looked at Nyanka and she was just as cool as a cucumber. Key came out with a blunt in his mouth and it finally reached me. The feeling of THC coursing through my system for the first time was the greatest feeling I ever had. I felt like I could float and I was thinking some pretty awesome thoughts. Everything was hilarious. Key then asked Nyanka to come in the kitchen and she went in and talked to him for a while. When she came back, she told me Key wanted to talk to me. When I got in the kitchen, Key was standing next to a large wad of cash on the counter and straight up asked me, "How much would you want me to give you for you to walk around my house for the rest of the day, butt naked?" I was shocked, stupid and money loving, so I said, $200. Key smiled and said, "Follow me." We went to his bedroom and he tried to kiss me. He had his hands down my pants and I became immediately uncomfortable. Next thing I know, Troy busted through the door and saw us and got upset. "What the fuck are you doing, man? You're supposed to have her ass up, face down." I ran out of the room and told Nyanka what happened. She and I got the hell out of there. I don't remember ever running so fast in my life. We looked back behind us and were terrified to see Troy lifting his legs into his car with one hand and what looked like a gun in his other hand. We looked at each other and sprinted to the main road where for some reason we knew we were safe. Thankfully, my crush was driving by and saw us. He asked if we wanted to go to his house for a kickback. We agreed and got in. When we got to our friend's house, we told them everything, smoked some more and laughed about it. I saw Key again a few times after that, but he never spoke, just hung his head and kept walking. As for Troy, last I heard, he was locked up for raping another one of my classmates and is not expected to be out of jail any time soon.
Number 2.
This happened over a decade ago, somewhere in northern Michigan during the summer. My friend Kathy, 18, my boyfriend's half-sister May, 16, and I, 17, drove down our hometown to visit friends, and we were on our way back in Kathy's shitty little Geo. By shitty, I'm talking the piece of crap had engine problems, overheating problems, ignition problems, and was constantly falling apart. More than once, it had stalled or just stopped working in the middle of the street while we were trying to get somewhere. But Kathy thought we'd be fine since we hadn't any problems with it on the way to our friend's house. It's a little past midnight, and we're roughly an hour away from home. There's nobody on the road. Dense woods on every side, no streetlights, no moon. I can barely see past the windshield because I have a form of albinism, which leaves me legally blind in my left eye and with really awful vision in my right eye. My depth perception is terrible, and I can't see more than a few feet ahead of me at most. But usually, I can make out lights and other cars when they pass, and sometimes street signs, and people when they're close enough. We drove down this narrow, hilly road, and on the descent down a hill, the Geo makes a strange sound. Kathy starts braking, and when we get to the bottom of the hill, the car quits working. Kathy swears and turns on the hazard lights. She and I get out of the vehicle. I help pop the hood, which causes a bunch of smoke to fly out. After the smoke mostly clears, Kathy tries to figure out what went wrong this time. We stand in the dark for at least 45 minutes, maybe longer, before we realized we couldn't fix the car and needed a tow truck. These were the days of MapQuest printouts and brick phones, so we couldn't whip out our smartphone and look up the closest tow truck. I decided to call my boyfriend, Caleb, to come pick us up, and suggest we come with a tow to pick up the Geo when it was daylight. May and Kathy agree, so I take out my crappy Nokia and call my boyfriend. It's then I realize I have no service. I asked May and Kathy if either of them have service. They both shake their heads. May gets a bit panicky, and we hold our phones up, trying to get a signal to no avail. It's hot as hell, and after failing to get any kind of service, we're all feeling a bit spooked and uncomfortable. May begs us to do something, because she's more afraid than Kathy and I. Kathy attempts to calm May down, and I wonder if the thick woods and hills are blocking our reception. I tell May and Kathy to wait by the car and walk away from them up the hill we had just come down. Holding my phone out, still no signal, I walk further and further away until I reach the top of the hill. I can't see the outline of the Geo anymore, but I can still hear May at a distance. Even at the top of the hill, I don't get a signal. I know it's gotta be the trees in the way, so I get the idea of climbing up a tree and calling from there, just to see if it works. In hindsight, this was not my brightest idea, but me being an idiot, I saunter off into the woods in search of a climbable tree. At this point, I just want to go home, and this is the only thing on my mind. I find a nice one with low branches and lift my body upwards toward the trunk. I climb the branches higher and higher, and about midway up the tree, I feel my pack of cigarettes fall out of my shorts pocket. Kind of annoyed, but I figure I can just look for them when I climb back down. I take my phone out and I hold it up once I get near the top. I got service. Relieved, I call Caleb. He doesn't pick up, so I call again until he does. He answers in a sleepy, pissed voice, but I'm having none of that and simply explain our situation. He asks where we are and I give him the name of the road, my best guess as to how far along we are on it. He says he'll be on his way and tells me to go back and wait with May and Kathy, then yells at me for being stupid and climbing a tree in the dark with my depth perception. I assure him that I'm fine. He's skeptical but says okay. I hung up. I start climbing down the tree, but my hand touches a big glob of sap, so I stop and try to wipe the sticky goop off on my shirt. I'm already sweaty and gross, so I'm not too happy about the sap. While I'm failing at getting this crap off my hands, I hear the strangest sound from below me. I completely freeze, not being able to place what that sound is, but it's moving pretty fast. I stare down into the darkness below, but I can't see shit. Just hear this noise continuing. It comes closer and closer, and then I hear it right below my tree. And then it stops, right under my tree. I hold onto the branch as tight as I can and wait. I hear leaves shuffling and twigs snapping, and after a while that stops, and the weird noise starts again, but it's heading away from me, deeper into the woods. I wait until I can no longer hear the sound, then finish climbing down and jump out of the tree. It's completely silent now, besides the sounds of the woods. So I grope around on the ground for my cigarettes. I don't find them, so I make my way out of the woods and back towards the road. I jog down the hill. When I reach the bottom, I notice May and Kathy aren't standing outside the car anymore, and the hazard lights are off. I walk over to the car and May rolls down the window a little bit and whispers in a panicked voice, "Elizabeth, where the hell are you?" I point back over my shoulder towards the hill and started to explain that I called my brother, but Kathy yelled, "What are you doing? Get the fuck back in the car!" I gave them a weird look, but May unlocks and opens the door. I crawl back into the seat with her, slamming it behind me. Kathy slams the locks and double checks them while May rolls up the window and makes sure the rest are rolled up. One of the windows has never closed all the way, but there's less than a finger space, so it's not too big a deal. But May is freaking out about it. Kathy has lost her cool as well. I'm so confused and ask what the hell is going on. May tells me that a bit after I went up to the hill, some weird person came out of the woods and ran, really funny, up the hill in the direction I went. They got freaked out and turned the lights off and got in the car. They thought he had got me. I'm honestly scared at this point, because if I hadn't stopped to wipe sap off my hands, I most likely would have got out of the tree at the time I heard the weird noise. I just knew it was that person. I told them the story, and everybody in the car is scared shitless, but are relieved that Caleb is on the way. We only have to play the waiting game now. We sit on the road for what seems like forever. The dread we were feeling made it seem like it was going slower and slower by the minute. Kathy and May are looking out the windows, surveying the area, and I'm just sitting here, hoping Caleb will hurry the fuck up and come rescue us. Suddenly, I hear May whine. "Oh my god." She starts crying. Kathy snaps her head to where May is looking and stifles a gasp. I look where they're facing. I see nothing but the dark. But then I hear it through a small opening in the window. May ducks down, as though doing that will make her invisible, and Kathy hides her head behind the steering wheel. I follow their lead and sort of hunch down in my seat, but the noise comes straight up to the window. I can almost make out the silhouette of a tall, skinny man, but then he presses his face against May's window, and I finally see him. Nobody screams. You'd think we would, but it didn't happen. We all just stared at each other. He looked in at us for a while until Kathy switched her brights on, hoping it would scare him off. It didn't. The dude just walked in front of the car and stood in front of the headlights. Maybe he thought he could block us from leaving? I don't know. I couldn't make out his features very well, but the guy had to have been somewhere a bit over 6 foot and no older than 30. He had the face of your average Joe. Nothing special. Nothing really sinister or particularly creepy that you'd notice about him if you ran into this dude in broad daylight. Dark shaved, pale skin, long face. Mace said he had light colored eyes and stubble with his eyebrows that made him look like he was always concerned. But there was no way that I could make that out, so I had to take her word for it. What was really weird was it was like 80 degrees and this guy was wearing corduroys. That explains the sound, and an oversized sweater with abnormally long sleeves. The sleeves went over his hands and flopped back and forth as he paced around in front of the Geo. I'm not sure how long he was in front of the car, but it was a while. Then good old Corduroy starts doing something really bizarre. He bends his arm towards his face, which I can only describe as looking like a praying mantis because of the way his sleeves were hanging, and then he begins walking circles around the car, rhythmically, taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, like goddamn Willy Wonka, but on speed or something. By now, May was sobbing and Kathy seemed like she had to vomit, so I felt like I had to be the brave one. I looked at the slight space in the open window, and when he orbited his way over there, I said, "Hey man, can you just stop? You're really freaking us out." Corduroy definitely heard me, so he switched to halt and looked back into the car through the windshield, straight at me. I asked him very firmly to leave, and he took an extended pause, smiled, then Willy Wonka'd his way out of my line of vision, into the darkness. After a while, Kathy said he disappeared into the woods, and May said, "I can't believe that worked." We awkwardly laughed about that, a weirdo he was and glad he left and whatever. We went back to waiting for Caleb, somewhat reassured but still paranoid. But after some time, Kathy said, "Oh no, he's back." I couldn't see, but apparently he was doing the 2 steps forward, 1 step back parallel to us on one side of the road, and this time he had a big tree branch he was holding with his sweater covered hands. May got scared, and I held her hand so she'd feel better about it, even though I was ready to shit myself. It was awful, because I didn't know if he was coming toward us, or if he was moving away from us, or what the hell he was even up to. It's kinda like when you know there's going to be a jump scare in a horror movie. And then I hear Corduroy's wish back towards the Geo, and in my window, he smacks it with the tree branch. May and I panic, and I scoot as close to her as possible. They see the guy back into the woods, then come running back and slamming the branch into the window, like he's jousting with a horse. Thankfully, the window didn't break, but it was terrifying. He did this repetitively. Kathy perks up in her seat, starts pointing out at the road. I see headlights. She blares the horn and flashes the lights. Lo and behold, it's our savior, Caleb. He brought his older brother, Alex, and they both got out of his car and headed over toward us. May's sobs turn into joyous laughter as her brothers approach. Now Caleb and Alex have always been tall guys. Walking around with them was like walking around with high elves. It felt very safe. Caleb was 6'8", and Alex is around 6'5", so I thought 2 dudes taller than Corduroy Jouster would make him leave. But nope. Caleb walks towards Corduroy, trying to assess the situation, and Alex comes over to the car and taps on the window. He tells Kathy to get out. She does, and he walks over to his car. Then he comes back to put the car in neutral so we can push it off to the side of the road. May and I slowly get out, and May makes a bolt for her brother's car. I help Alex push the car to the side while Caleb distracts the Corduroy yanks the branch away from Caleb and starts backing up by going 2 steps backward, 1 step forward, and disappears into the darkness down the street. I can't see him, but Caleb can. The guy backs up pretty far, and then comes launching at Caleb, who sprints the other way down the road. That stick could have really hurt. He bumps past Alex, who had already got out of the Geo and was opening his car door, leaving me behind the Geo alone. Corduroy apparently changed directions and aimed the stick at me, but I couldn't tell. I just heard everybody shouting Elizabeth. This startled me. I jumped inside the Geo, hearing Corduroy smash his stick into the back window with a loud thud in his wish. I take the long way around the car and sprint off into the road and feel Caleb grab my arm and tug me over to Alex's car. I feel like the wind has been knocked out of me. My legs don't seem to work. But Caleb manages to shove me in the back seat, scrambles into the passenger side. But now we're all safe in the car, and Corduroy is standing there like a mantis in front of the headlights again. He'd abandoned his stick and just stood there with no intention to move. Alex puts the car into reverse and slams on the gas, making me knock my head against the door. Then making the sloppiest U-turn ever, nearly drives us into the woods, but he got us back onto the road. Everybody was in 100% what the fuck mode as Alex tore away, far over whatever the speed limit was. May and Kathy swear they saw Corduroy chasing behind us from Alex. May and Kathy swear they saw Corduroy chasing behind us after Alex made the U-turn, but there was no way he was catching up. The next day, I went back there with Caleb, Kathy, and the guy from the tow truck place. There was no sign of Corduroy anymore, but when we approached the Geo, we saw that in the space where the window didn't close all the way were my cigarettes. The box was missing, but they were all neatly jammed in a row along the window space. I have no doubt it was the work of Corduroy Jouster. To this day, I wonder if he knew I was up the tree and took my cigarettes, or if he thought I dropped them and went further into the woods looking for me, or if he just found them later and decided to stick them through the window, because he was a fucking weirdo after all. I still wonder what the hell his intentions were. I still have so many unanswered questions.